Hey guys, it's Nicole. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about all those books I read while I was not making YouTube videos and while I was off social media for 3 months. So yeah, just all the books I basically read while I was MIA. There are a few, not too many, that's why I thought I'd just combine it in one video. This is essentially a wrap up from April all the way through to the end of August, but there are some months I didn't really read much. Like I know in May I didn't finish a book. I know I was reading but I didn't actually finish a book. So yeah, let's just get right into it. Book 1 that I finished in April that I just want to quickly mention is A Song of Wraiths and Ruins. I don't want to go too in depth with this because I did actually read this in a vlog, so if you want fresher thoughts as I was reading the book, you can watch that vlog. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 3.5 stars in the end. I think for the majority of the book though, it was sitting on 3 stars. This book follows a princess and it also follows a regular boy in this fantasy world who ends up making a deal with this devil. I can't remember if he was actually a devil or a demon, but he was something equivalent, and this demon has stolen one of his sisters. So in order to get his sister back, he made a deal that he will enter this competition where whoever wins this competition will become the suitor of the princess and essentially like the next, like, you know, ruling alongside her. So he makes a deal with the demon to kill the princess, and to do that he enters this competition. I really like the boy. I think his name was Malik, if I'm remembering correctly. I really loved how he was quite a softie. He dealt with like anxiety. I just kind of really like it. I feel like it's so easy for fantasy books to just sort of throw in the tough young male character, and I just appreciated that he wasn't that. I really enjoyed their relationship that he does sort of form and get to know the princess. However, the princess, I did have a little bit of time warming up to her, but once I did really like her. I think this book was just kind of fun for the most part, and then it was really the ending that I loved and gave it that like extra 0.5 stars, and is what makes me want to continue on with the series. I then read in April The Golden Fool, and I ended up giving this book 4 stars. This is my favorite book out of this trilogy. So this is the Fool's Errand trilogy, which is the 3rd trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings. If you get it, you get it. You don't, you don't. It's complicated, okay? But I really enjoyed this. I really cannot say too much on this, but I think what I loved about this the most is it felt like it had its own plot, because like book 1, while I did enjoy Fool's Errand, book 1, it was a lot of recapping of what had happened in the original trilogy, and in this it was just really fun and exciting because it was just kind of going on its own story. But we also had a lot of characters from the Live Ship Traders trilogy come in here, and we had characters from the original trilogy showed up. So it was just like a really fun time because you had all these characters show up, you had these characters meet from different parts of the world. It was really good. And now I'm just going to talk about, because I may as well since I'm talking about this, the next book, which is Fool's Fate. Now I did not finish this until, I think, when was it? I finished this in June. So I think I started this in April and it took me like all of May to read, and then I finished it at the very beginning of June. This was like the greatest disappointment of this year for me reading wise. I was not a fan. I gave this book 2 stars. I can't go into why I didn't really like it because spoilers. These books are like book 8 and book 9 in a series, so there's not much I can say. But this is disappointing because I felt like this series really undid a lot of the conclusions that were done in previous books. I also did have high expectations for this book in particular because I have loved how Robin Hobb has concluded her other 2 series, and she has real like satisfying endings, satisfying deaths, full circle moments, things that like kind of all click into place, and it's like amazing, especially like the magic system and those sort of reveals I've really enjoyed. Whereas in this one I was kind of dissatisfied. I was also not the biggest fan of a lot of the treatment of the women in here. I mean, all along it's kind of been like not the greatest, but I was quite forgiving because this series was originally like first published in the 90s, not these books but like the first lot of books, and these were published early 2000s. And I thought when I was reading the Life Should Change trilogy that her writing of women, whoops, anyway, her writing of women was getting better, but I don't know, I really don't know, like I don't know, this book just annoyed me a little bit. I do plan to continue on. I haven't yet continued on with the series because I am bitter, but yeah, I just wanted to like quickly point out some of my problems, let you guys know I've read it, because I know a lot of you have been following my journey with Robin Hobb at the beginning of the year, so that's my update on her. One thing I've got to add though, and I will always keep reading because I love the characters, like there are characters I love so much that I will like continue reading these no matter what, and I think that's really important to highlight. So the next book I read back in June was A Dead Djinn in Cairo. This is a short novella that is a prequel, one of two prequels actually, to A Master of Djinn, which is one of my most anticipated releases of 2021 that I really needed to get to already. I really enjoyed this. I really love desert settings. I've realized recently they're just one of my favorite fantasy settings. I don't know what it is about it, but I love it. I love it. This book kind of surprised me because it was sort of a murder mystery, and I really enjoyed the writing. I really enjoyed what was set up. Like there was a supernatural creature, so obviously we have Djinn, but then we also had like hints of like angels, and that was just like such an interesting combination. I honestly wish this was longer. I love long books. I really enjoyed this. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this all does like in the other books and in the world. Yeah, I hope we get to see these characters again, because I don't know if we do, but fingers crossed. And I gave that book 4 stars. I then in June also decided to reread some books that I have read before, both of which are part of a series, and I wanted to reread these because the latest release in the series had just come out. And the first one is The Last Magician, the second one is The Devil's Thief. I first read these back in 2019 and they were some of my favorite books that I read that year. I really loved these, and I've said ever since, I think if you like The Diviners, you will really like this series. It's very similar. It is set in the early 1900s and we follow a whole group of people who do have their own sort of supernatural abilities, and this one also has time travel element in it because we do have a time traveler in the story, and I really liked it. I still stand by my opinion that the first book is the best and the second one is slightly disappointing. I found the second one more disappointing reading it second time round than I did the first. I gave book 1 4 stars. I gave book 2 2.5 stars. So it's just kind of an average read. And I believe I gave the latest book in the series, book 3, The Serpent's Curse, 2 stars, which I really did find disappointing. I think where this series sort of loses me is in the first book we follow mostly just Esther, and she is this time traveler who sort of travels back into the past to steal objects. So she's like a time traveler and a thief. In order to travel back in time by like greater periods, I guess, or lengths, I don't know how to describe it, but she uses like an amplifier, and basically at the start of book 1 she loses that and she gets stuck in the early 1900s. So part of the first book is her trying to find her way home while also trying to find the object she's been sent back in time to steal. Now in book 1 we're introduced to a whole bunch of characters. In book 2 we're introduced to more, and even more characters in The Serpent's Curse make an appearance or an arrival, and it just ends up being one of those series where there's just so many characters, so many storylines that it just felt like it got lost for me, especially like the direction of the story. And I really just preferred like book 1 for its more simplistic narrative, I guess. I still really like the series overall. I still plan to finish the last book whenever that comes out, but I think what started off as a really strong series is kind of disappointing, I'm not gonna lie. Next up, I listened to the audiobook of EXO by Fonda Lee. I picked this up because I really enjoy Fonda Lee's Jade City series. absolutely love it. One of my favorites. So I did think I went into this with maybe a little bit of high expectations. I loved the first half of this. The first half of this was probably like a 4 stars. Like, it was really quite enjoyable. But as the story went on, I don't know if it was like it felt repetitive or my interest just kind of lost, or if I was like disappointed. I think it was like a combination of all things. It was just like a fun read, but like not anything I could see myself like returning to and rereading or anything like that. Basically, this book is a sci-fi futuristic sort of novel, and it's set in the future, and it sort of does look and examine at how alien life has interacted with humans and how it has impacted and changed how humans have lived. So there are now these humans who are called exos, which are basically humans who have been infused with like alien technology that gives them like super senses and super strength and all that sort of thing. And then there's a whole group of people who are like really against that, and they're sort of known as the rebels. And then we have like those who are like following the alien rulership and getting their kids infused with this alien technology and sort of living that sort of way of life. We follow a boy called Donovan, who is, well, he's like a young adult. I think he was like 19 or something, and he's an exo, so he's got the alien fusion technology. And there's this whole thing where they like kind of get trained in a sort of an academy and all that to learn how to use it and all that, and then they become part of like a squad. And he's out one night, he ends up getting kidnapped by like a rebel group. They find out that Donovan is one of the leaders' sons, so he's like got a really important father figure and all that in terms of like politics and social status. So the rebels want to use him. I can remember thinking while reading this that this book had a lot of really interesting concepts and stuff, but the directions they sort of took and like the focus I wanted the book to be was sort of not the direction the book went, so that was kind of disappointing. I can also distinctly remember at the time wanting to really read a book with a lot of female characters. This isn't a critique of this book, but it is a very male dominated story. Like, there's a lot of male characters and very few female, and I was just like not in the mood for that. I do for sure plan to read the second book because this book is only a duology. Haven't gotten around to it yet. I will probably pick up the audiobook sometime soon. I gave it 3 on Goodreads, but it's probably more like a 2.75. I think I gave it. It feels like a 2.75 in my head, so that's what we'll go with. I also listened to another audiobook, and that is The Project by Courtney Summers. Again, with this one, I don't have any real critiques or anything, but I just like gave it like 3 stars. There's no other way I could like envision this book being written or told, but I just don't think it was for me. I think this is where I was quite slumpy, so my mood on books was just so meh, and what I wanted from books and what was not hitting me or whatever I'm kind of vague about because of my mood back then. I was really anticipating this because, again, I really enjoyed this author's previous book, Sadie. I was really interested to see how this one was going to be because it follows a cult. I think where this lost me though was there are 2 timelines. So in the past timeline, we're following the older of 2 sisters who ends up joining this cult, and we're sort of seeing her like how she first comes into contact with the people of the cult, why she sort of joins, and just sort of her perspective. And then in the present timeline, we are following the younger sister, who is now like a young woman herself. I think she's about 20 or something, and she is trying to work on her journalist career, and she's sort of struggling because she doesn't really have the educational background that is required. And she starts to sort of investigate this cult that her sister was a part of in order to write an article about it. So we're sort of following these 2 timelines, and I've said this before, I'll probably say it again, 2 timelines often lose me, especially when they're like 2 separate narratives. If it's really short snippets of a different timeline, then I'm okay with it, but for some reason I've just found, especially in the last year or so, if it's 2 timelines, it depends on the book, but most of the time it loses me. And I think that was the main sort of thing that I didn't like about this book. I can understand why the author made that choice to tell the story this way, and I think it's a good way to tell a story, especially for this story, but it just didn't work for me. Overall, I'm really glad I read this. I definitely plan to pick up more of Courtney Summers. I do really find her concepts interesting and the themes she explores interesting, and I really do like the way she writes characters and develops them. I think she writes really realistic, flawed characters. Gave this book 3 stars in the end. So in July I finally got around to reading Wicked Fox. I've been meaning to read this for the longest time. I was back in like a K-drama mood, so I picked this book up. I actually did pick this up for a readathon that I participated in, which was the Olympic Games. This is literally a K-drama. Like, everyone says that and it's just so true. There's no other description. So we follow a young girl who is a gumiho, and in Korean mythology they are these sort of mysterious supernatural beings who can sort of seduce men. I don't know, they're very dangerous, they're very beautiful. She has to feed at least once a month on the soul of a human in order to survive, and she chooses to feed on like sort of criminals and bad people. But at the very start of the book she encounters the second lead, or the main love interest, whatever you call him. She saves him and she sort of thinks she's never going to see him again, and it turns out that they go to the same school. And yeah, it's kind of about them getting to know each other. I really love this. I love K-dramas, so I knew I was going to love this, and I just loved how it did like so many of the classic K-drama like trope scenes. Like, there was a scene where someone threw something at the main girl and the guy protected her, and that is like the blueprint to K-dramas. It's just so fun, such good vibes. I also really liked how it did have some sort of deeper themes and discussion. Like, it really did talk about loneliness and the sort of different forms of loneliness that the two main characters were both individually experiencing, because our main girl was experiencing loneliness for who she was. Like, she had to keep it a secret. She's moved around schools a lot because she always would get in trouble and then would have to go in case she would be found out. And then our main guy, he also experiences his own different form of loneliness. So I really appreciated that. That's what really stands out. But then it also had like really wholesome vibes because, you know, they were coming together and getting to know each other. Like, it was cute. And honestly, the two of them had such a like sunshine and grumpy pair dynamic going on, but she was the grumpy and he was the sunshine, which I really love it when they do that, make the guy the sunshine character. I really loved this. I gave it 4 stars. Still haven't read the sequel, need to try and do that before the end of the year. If you're in the mood for a fun YA urban fantasy, this is a good one. Next up, I listened to the audiobook of Ace of Spades, which I loved this. I gave it 5 stars. I had high expectations going in because I know so many people have been loving and raving about it since it came out earlier this year, and now I'm one of those people. This story follows 2 black students who attend this all-white school, and they start getting these text messages that start revealing their secrets, things that are not like out in the open. What I loved about this book and what really stood out to me is the way it just got so intense. Like, at first it wasn't really intense, it was kind of like minor things or embarrassing things, and then it just blew up, honestly. I also really liked the 2 POVs. I really liked them individually. I thought the way they were written as well was so clear. Like, some of my issues, especially with YA contemporary books, because this is a YA contemporary thriller, is I find that authors often sort of at some point in the story get not mixed up, but the POVs can sort of blur and you don't really know whose POV you're in, because like the voice sort of loses what made it distinguished. And I found like that didn't happen with this the whole way through. It was very clear whose POV I was reading from, which was just like so good. And like I said again, like the way this book just got so intense and so scary was so well crafted. Like, it really felt like it snuck up on you, even though like you saw it coming along. I will say I do think the start of the book was a little bit slow, but like once you get into it, you're into it. If you've heard people talk about this book, you've probably heard people say that it's inspired by Gossip Girl, and I think like you can definitely see the inspiration, but it's like a lot more intense and, you know, scary than Gossip Girl. So highly recommend, especially the audiobook. The audiobook was fantastic. Next up, I finally got around to reading Chain of Iron by Clare. Clare, look, I'm one of those girls who've literally been reading her since I was like 14, so this series is very nostalgic to me, very fun, but I have definitely outgrown it. Like, I do think there's a lot of repetitiveness in terms of like storylines, even characters, but I read this and I have a good time. This is the second book in the Last Hours series, and we follow the children of the characters from the Infernal Devices series. So it's always just really nice to see like what all those old characters who were like literally my favorite characters when I was like 16, what they're up to and like what their kids are up to and all of that. I really don't have much to say about this other than it was a fun time. I gave it 3 stars. Like I said, I've outgrown this series a lot, but it still does mean something to me. I really loved this sort of like a fake dating relationship set up in this book, and I did really like the 2 characters involved in that. Josie Blackthorn is my favorite character in this series so far. He is a ghost, and we did get to see more of him in here, but I will say I was a little bit annoyed because he definitely showed up at points of the story where he was needed to further the plot or whatever, and I would have really liked to have him have his own storyline and sort of relevancy to the story. Still really enjoyed it. Still plan to finish this series whenever the next one comes out, but yeah, I really don't have a lot to say on this one. Okay, so now to talk about the books I've been waiting to talk about. Okay, so at the end of July I picked up The Devotion of Suspect X, and then in August I picked up a sequel, which is Salvation of a Saint, and then I also listened to the audiobook of A Midsummer's Equation, which is another sequel to this detective series that is translated from Japanese. I can't even tell you guys how much I loved these. They were so good. I don't even know who I am anymore because I've literally become so obsessed with thrillers ever since, and I've been reading and listening to quite a few, and I think that's going to continue for the rest of the year. And I used to like never read thrillers, so I've had like a whole reading identity change since I've been MIA because of these books. And I wish I'd read these before I'd done my mid-year freakout tag, but these books and this author, Keigo Higashino, would be my answer for the question, who is a new favorite Yuchi author. I think out of all the books, this is my favorite because it's quite a differently told mystery. These are murder mysteries. There's a really big focus on those involved or surrounding a murder. We really get to know them, and then there are detectives who are solving the case on the side. These are just so clever. I don't even know what to say to them except just go read them. Like literally just go read them. The saddest thing though is there's a whole bunch of these books, but currently only 3 of these are translated from Japanese into English, which is just so sad. You don't have to read them in order. This book here is actually like, it's not even book 1 in the series, but it's the first book translated. I have read quite a few thrillers since, and like this is like the bar for my favorite thriller of all time. Like that's what I'm measuring it by. So I just cannot recommend these enough, and I wish I had more to say, but I really don't, except go read them. Like the character development, I think that's what really makes these stand out, is the way these characters, especially like not even the detective characters, but the characters who were involved in the murder somehow, or who witnessed the murder, or who like, you know, found the body, the way they are developed really make these books. I cannot even express that enough. It's gonna be my mission in life now to try and get everyone to read this. So the last book I read in August, and the last book I want to talk about in this video, is All Boys Aren't Blue. This is a non-fiction memoir sort of book, and I loved this so much. Everyone always talks about this. Highly recommend you pick up the audiobook as well. That's how I consume the story, and it is narrated by the author themselves, and it is so good. It talks a lot about like sexual identity, growing up queer, and like questioning yourself, sort of the hatred, the stigmas, and just sort of someone telling their story about their experiences. And I loved it. It gets very honest, very raw, and everyone loves this book and recommends it. And yeah, me too. I didn't give a rating. I don't rate non-fiction. I don't like to. It just feels weird. I just really like to consume non-fiction stories, not kind of think about how I would critique it or whatever. And I don't really have any critiques on this at all. I really loved it. I think, but the only thing I want to say is I would love a follow-up, because I felt like I learned a lot while reading this. So yeah, that's it. That's all the books I read. There are 5 other books that I have read that I'm not going to include in this wrap up because I have been filming a vlog for them slowly throughout the year, and the theme of the vlog will be very obvious if I like review the books in this video. So I'm just gonna like kind of exclude them, and you know, you'll get my thoughts in the vlog anyway. But yeah, not a whole lot. I've got a lot of reading to catch up on for the rest of the year. I just feel like I've missed out on so many amazing books, so many amazing releases that I've been looking forward to. So that's definitely going to be my mission. But let me know what have been some of your favorite reads of this year. Tell me what I need to get to next, please. I need the help in deciding because it's hard. Yeah, and that's it from me today. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you're enjoying whatever you're currently reading, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.